Hello and welcome to Aim to Amplify, our new podcast where we love to just amplify your content, your brand. And today we're going to amplify a magnificent story. I am going to be very truthful to you guys right now. I have not heard the story of this man that we have the honor to have in our studio today, but I have heard that I had to have him here, that he had to be a guest, that his story needs to be told and his story needs to be heard to inspire others to find their power and to thrive in their life. So it is an honor for us to have Mike here with us. I am your host, Xochitl Rodriguez, and we have Mike Weber. I don't know that much about this guy. I just know that I had to have him here based on another guest that we had here in the podcast and a couple other people that have reached out to me. So I am kind of going to let him kind of tell us his story. I know it's a powerful story from what I've heard. And so let's just go ahead and dive in. Mike Weber, where do you want to start? Where do you want to tell the story?
I was born in Houston, actually Texas City, but I grew up in Houston. I went to South Houston Intermediate, high school, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But let me back up a little bit. At 3 years old, I experienced the trauma.
Okay.
But that's retrospective. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time in my house, my family, to anyone looking out from the outside looking in, it looked like, the perfect family. The doors closed, a different story, right? But so at 11, the chaos in my head was just overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would do things to overachieve. I would make straight A's. I would play sports. I would do anything to make my parents think I'm better because I didn't know who to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 12 years old, I found myself alone in a field off of Edgebrook and 45, drinking a 32-ounce beer.
Well,
and I didn't feel drunk. I felt normal.
mm-hmm.
And so I ended up chasing normal the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever normal.
Right. What you felt was normal at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just to calm the madness of my head because my anxiety, everything, constantly when you wake up, or I wasn't good enough at anything. I didn't like me. I didn't like being me. So if I could do anything to make me feel otherwise, it worked.
Yes.
And so that's the way I led my life. By the time I was 14, I had a needle in my arm.
Oh.
And that was for instant gratification. Why am I going to spend all that time drinking when I can do this just like this? And I have two little brothers that unfortunately kind of followed my footsteps, but my mom died when I was 18 and she was my emotional pipeline. And she was also an alcoholic, and I didn't know that till she died, but I was so wrapped up in me.
Right.
That I didn't realize it. And and so I got mad at God, and that just fueled the fire for me to...
Oh, that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, continue doing what I do. Mm-hmm. And like most addicts, you got all kinds of stories, but there's all kinds of miracles too. Many times I should have died. I OD'd for 4 minutes one time, and it was my fellow addicts that helped me. Mm-hmm. They went down the hallway and got $25 worth of cocaine and shot me up with it, and that jump started my heart. We didn't have Narcan and stuff like that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And heroin became my drug of choice because I started losing this little finger. Mm-hmm. And it was like in the late 70s, 80s, and everybody was scared of AIDS, and I was swabbing needles and all that kind of stuff. And so I was so afraid. And then I got in the military.
Oh.
And that's one thing I managed to do that I'm proud of. I spent 4 years in the military, but my finger kept getting bad. And when I got out, there was all kinds of drugs on the street, but none of them would kill the pain in my finger. And so somebody got tired of my whine and said, try this. And every addict has that one drug they're never going to try. Oh, I'll never do that. But I did, and it worked. And that's the problem. It worked. And so through a family intervention, I get taken up to Maryland by my dad, who would never make that ride again because I was detoxing from alcohol, benzos, heroin. The odds of me dying would have been great. But I get up there, they cut my finger off. Nobody ever saw my finger except for the team. They cut it off because I was so ashamed of it. I didn't have anybody to blame for it.
And can you just out of ignorance, was there something wrong with the finger? Was it because of the
it went green, and
okay,
it was a cut that wouldn't heal.
Oh, okay.
And it went green.
Okay.
So I got sober for a year.
Yeah.
And then my index finger started going bad. And I got mad at God again. And I lost that. Through a period of years, I think it was 8 or 10 years span, I was using heroin. After I would lose a finger, get sober for years, and then go back to heroin.
That was a cycle in your life.
The other cycle was I'd go to Maryland because my dad had retired from NASA up there, and he wanted to live up there. And it's a nice place, but it's too cold for me. Plus, my daughters were in. Here's the thing: I thought my daughters needed me. I got to get home. My daughters are just fine. What they didn't need was a dad that's going to come home and leave them again. And so through a process, I'll shorten this a little bit. I lost all my fingers, and you said no cussing, but my last one was this one. And I thought that was a message from God. Like, and I begged them to cut that finger off, and they wouldn't do it. Because it's dangerous in Texas. Somebody lets you in traffic, and you go, hey, thank you.
Right. You can't do that here, not in Texas yet.
Finally, in August of 2001, I was in Maryland, and I relapsed. And it was this simple. I was working on a broodmare farm where I would take care of the horses and all that kind of stuff. And Colt drug me through the paddocks, and it hurt my shoulder. And so I went to the VA and figuring they'd give me Vicodin or something like that. But they didn't give me any pain medication. That upset me. So I drove through West Baltimore, pulled up to the curb, and within 10 minutes, I had a heroin.
Wow.
And so that was about a 3-month relapse. Then I went into a place called the Helping Up Mission, and I knew everything was going to be okay. And
is that different than the previous experiences?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because all the learning, I'd learned a lot. Just because you relapse doesn't mean you don't learn stuff. I'd learned a lot. I did do methadone, which is frowned upon, but I did a very small dose for about 6 months, and never felt different, and it just stepped off with no pain. But I walked into that place, and I said, it's almost like God lifted me up and said, you're done. You work for me now.
Oh, wow.
And so since then,
Wow.
It's been miracle after miracle. And so, one day at a time. It was November 19th, 2001, when I got sober. I got the best job ever while I was staying at that mission. It was selling newspapers on the street corner. And the first day I made $18.75. I had made many paychecks since then, and I could not tell you the amount of any of them. But that $18.75 rings true. And so,
can I take a pause here for a little bit? I want to retract because I know your life probably, where it sounds to me like where you're about to start saying looks very different from your past. So I want to just kind of touch a little bit of things on the past that you had told me about.
Yeah.
You said that from a very young age, you faced trauma in your life.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing with us how did trauma look for you in your household, as much as you feel comfortable sharing?
Physical abuse.
Okay.
Dad towards mom. Us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's let me explain something too. When I went looking in my childhood, I didn't look to blame anybody.
Yeah.
I'm looking to explain why they didn't like me.
Exactly. Yes.
And my dad and I have a great relationship now, but he admits he thought fear was the best way to get respect.
Yes.
But I watched so much of that.
And when you're that young, it's hard to understand and to explain that your parents are doing the very best that they can. So we do want to honor your dad and your mom, Kevin, for that, but it does affect us in different ways.
It does. I mean, I'd take my brothers, we'd hide under the bed, and because I was the oldest, and so it's what I see now that I've been sober for a while is snapshots of good memories. Like I had 1 hour apiece every week. And I was watching Walt Disney on Sunday night at 6:30. And that was like my escape.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to kind of bring back to that area of your life, just because I feel like people are afraid of the word trauma. People are afraid of the word, things like that. And it's like, it looks different.
The world is trauma-phobic. It's the thing. Is that PTSD was not even introduced till 1980. And then when you looked at trauma, it was major things like combat or rape. And there's so much more to it.
Right.
Child abuse is just now, in the big scope of things of psychology, psychiatry, and all that kind of stuff. Well, number one, psychiatry doesn't spend much time with. Neither does medical shit. Which is a little irritating. But the whole thing is that it all starts at your childhood. There are studies that show even veterans that go, get two guys see the same thing. One of them comes home, grieves it, processes it, moves on. The other one, he was up in the straitjacket in the VA.
Right.
But they're like, and not every child that is exposed to trauma becomes a drug addict, but every drug addict was exposed to trauma once as a child. And very few women I've met, it was not sick.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe now.
Yes. Yeah. No, I've been in that. I was as a mental health professional. I've been in that field, helping sexual abuse children. So you said at the age of 14, you found yourself in the middle of the field with a beer with a 12, even younger. What happened? Like, what was that? The solution.
For one thing, I'd taken sips off my dad's beer, and back then people didn't, obviously.
Right. Yes.
My aunt gave me a shot of tequila once, told me how to do it right. But what is a huge red flag is if you're drinking alone.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a Schlitz distributor that lived close by, so I went into his garage and took a quart of
Mm-hmm.
and I sat in this field, and I don't know, it was almost like I don't know why I did it,
Mm-hmm.
but I did.
But you said something that it really is impactful because you say you found your normal.
Yeah.
Wow. Like you had like and you know just and I do not do recovery and I'm not in that area of mental health, but with alcohol you felt your normal, and that's
The problem with drugs and alcohol is they wear off.
yes. But I mean now I mean we're gonna go forward, but now you know that was not your normal. That was your normal for that moment that you needed to cope at that moment.
It was my coping skill.
Yes.
You know, like we teach coping skills, right? That was my coping skill. But then the downside, or well, there's all downsides, but is that eventually you need more.
Right. Yeah.
And then more. And then more. And then more. Not everybody did. And what they found out about my hand was I had blocked my brachial artery. So it could have been in the Army because I worked in a combat thing where we rolled missiles and put them on a. Could have been. Probably it was a needle, but I don't know. But my grandkids love it. Because I could be there.
Yeah.
And finally they'll ask, people, what happened to your fingers?
Yeah.
And then I give them a circulation story.
Yeah. But I think a lot of the parents, because I was in a recovery group not too long ago where we're talking about teenagers having addictions and stuff like that. And a lot of parents have the guilt of, you know, what did I do and things like that. But it's like if they find they're normal with some kind of substance, and then there's something that we can dig in there. And I think that's a new perspective, for at least for me, to see.
I think there's, for one thing, trauma is so complicated because there's a genetic factor, there's a cultural factor, and there's an environment factor. And they're just now putting all this stuff together.
Right.
The genetics, they have no clue. In other words, there's not a gene that causes you to, but that causes one person to not be able to process it. The biggest irritant for me is when I hear somebody say, kids are resilient.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is so far from the truth.
Tell me more about that.
Because you're not. They just soak up everything. You know, a child could be traumatized in the womb and spanking. I'm going to get blowback from this. But you should never lay your hand on your child, and because Harvard, Yale, tons of other researchers show that when you spank someone, it goes straight to their brain into the fight or flight, and it could be as bad as someone who got sexually abused.
Being back so India.
And I still get disagreement every time I bring it. Well, it's okay to pat them on the butt. And it's okay, go ahead, but you're going against Yale and Harvard and everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the experts are saying, and how, for me, as a mental health professional, so I always ask, like, how is that going to look in 10 years from now?
Right.
Not just right now that it's okay to pat them in the back so they can stop this behavior, but how is that going to affect in 10 years from now, with positive or negative way, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, okay, well, thank you for that clarification. Because like I said, I think there's, you know, we hear trauma, we hear, like you said, combat, or we hear death, or we hear things like that, but it's like, it can be so many things.
Yeah.
So let's begin from yesterday. I think the date that you gave us November 19, 2001.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I got that. I was trying to remember the date. So tell us your life changed. You said that day.
Yeah. I went to work at this is where God turns a positive into a negative, or a negative into a positive.
Mm-hmm.
Went to work at a retirement facility.
Okay.
And I was there CNA, but a little step above that they had in Maryland. And but I worked in the nursing part where people would come out of surgery or something like that, and I try to get them. I was called a restorative aide, and I try to get them walk an extra step or something like that. And then I needed a phlebotomist.
Okay.
So they sent me to the course for 4 days. Teacher said, "You sure you never done this?" And I said, "I can safely say I've never drawn blood from anyone, but I knew how to find veins."
Right.
And which was important, especially on older people like I'm finding out now. I got to tell people where to, if I'm getting an IV or something.
Mm-hmm.
But so I just thought that was funny that God would take that negative and turn it into something positive.
So much power right there. That's amen.
And so anyway, I was leaving there because I was going to go to Bible college. I was going to do all this kind of stuff. And it's like God said, "No, you're going to put your kids through college." And so my supervisor said, "You ever thought about being a youth minister?" I said, "Are you kidding me? I got 2 teenage daughters in Texas. I don't understand them." And I was in Maryland at the time. And I'll get to that, but it takes sacrifice. Let me hold that thought. But anyway, 2 hours later, I was at an AA meeting, and a friend of mine walked up before the meeting. He said, "Hey, Mike, we needed a youth pastor. I put your name in the hat. I hope that's okay."
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up doing that job for 7 years.
When God has something for you,
sometimes it whispers, and so that'll bang.
Yeah, I have to get the bang most of the time because I'm not.
Then I was fortunate I opened a 501c3 ministry called In the Blink of an Eye, and trying to help addicts. I didn't know what I was doing, but yet still kept it running for like 10 years, and were able to help some people. But I had this vision, but I didn't know how to set up a board or do. I did all the fundraising. I did all of it. It just didn't work out the way I wanted it to, but we were able to help some people. But in that process, I was working in the field, and that's when I did adolescent IOP. And I found out the best way to get their attention is there's nothing funnier than an old guy trying to be cool. So I walk in and I go, "Yo," and I said, "Mike, we don't say that."
Yeah, wasabi.
Well, what do y'all say? So they give me an urban dictionary. And then that way I was privy to it. And can I mention one thing? There was one young lady that asked a question I've never heard but one time. And she was having a bad day, and I asked her, I said, "What's going on?" She said, "I don't know if I want to live a short life with heroin or a long life without it." And I thought,
Yeah.
And Stephen Tyler of Arrows.
Were you sober at this time when she, or were you?
Yeah, I was working as her counselor.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, turns out she ended up opening an art gallery in Baltimore.
Wow.
But Stephen Tyler of Aerosmith said, "The problem with heroin is you'll feel great till your last heartbeat." Yeah. And there's a difference with heroin. But, and I forgot what I was going to say before, but.
You were giving us a story about doing the being a minister an adolescent minister, and
maybe some.
Yeah.
I think that, and then I got into therapy and sacrifice. My immediate reaction was I wanted to go back to Texas to be close to my children. I was separated from my wife at the time. We finally ended up getting divorced. But I wanted to be there for my children because I thought, but again, I'd done that before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to be very sure that I had a grip on me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I tell my clients is, if you want to be a better father, you got to be a better you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to love your children, you got to love you. And the truth is, I didn't know how to love anybody.
Right. Yeah.
And
because from a very young age, you mentioned that you didn't like yourself.
yeah, and much less know how to love anybody.
Right.
And so I stayed in a controlled environment for like 2 years. Mm-hmm. Then I got the opinion of some people I know that had much more recovery than me. And I finally got my own apartment. And I would have paid the price of that apartment just to have the bathroom.
Yeah.
Because I'd lived for years with people having to take everything you own in the bathroom and bring it out and clean up and all that kind of stuff. So, and then, ironically, my ex had some problems, and my youngest daughter had to come spend her senior year with me in Maribel. She was not a happy camper.
Because at this point, you haven't spent that much time with your daughter, right?
I would get down for Christmas, but so she came up, and then later on, years later, she said that was the best year of my high school because I didn't have to worry about, and her mom wasn't doing too well, and I didn't have to worry about the electricity being cut off. I didn't have to worry about mom being hurt by a man or anything like that, or drunk, and so that was for.
That was a break. That's powerful.
Yeah, it's all God. I mean, I could take no credit because everything I did was so counter to me. Mm-hmm. It was like, but now I can't even relate to the person I'm telling you a story of. Yeah, I mean, I know it's there.
Right. Yeah.
But it's not something that I dwell on. Now I could go through my whole neighborhood and I don't get bad memories. I remember good times. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what happens the longer you deal with trauma and stuff like that, is that the snapshots at the good times are easier to access. Because when you first get into treatment or therapy or anything like that, you're so focused on the negative. Mm-hmm. And what I try to remind people is, you're not a bad person. You're beautiful people. Mm-hmm. You're just broken.
Right. Oh.
And God makes great things out of broken people.
Yeah. Yeah. Not so long ago, I posted something on my own social media about God equips the called, doesn't call the equipped. Yeah. So it's So it's shaping the broken,
right?
So they can reach out. So I want to ask there's two questions in my mind right now for you, Mike. One of them is, you mentioned miracles. You mentioned God has made a lot of miracles. And then another one that I want to touch base on is your process in therapy. Because obviously, I'm a mental health professional. So that's always kind of intriguing to me. And the human behavior and emotional, that process is fascinating to me. But let's talk about the miracles first. Because you talk about that and how that has helped you through. You said there's nothing. After that, it was all miracles. So that kind of, that was an impactful statement.
Just too many. This is going to sound horrible, but I was in, and God forgive my daughter, Uh, she may not be appreciative of me bringing this up, but I was about a year sober, and my wife at the time called me and said, "Your daughter has been raped," and she was 16. That's my oldest daughter. And you know, when you're in AA, you get this database. You hear stories and everything. Well, I knew a guy that had lost his daughter to his son-in-law, killed her, and he didn't drink and he didn't go to prison, because my immediate response was I could have made a phone call and that would have been over with. But
Yeah.
but I had that. But God put that buffer zone in me, and I flew down there and took my daughter into crisis center. And the good news is she's a great mother. I would ask prayers for her. She has metastatic breast cancer, but she's doing really well and advocates for women and stuff like that. But that to me is a miracle, because if I'd have been in Houston, they would be visiting her father in prison.
Yeah.
I got. There's so many coincidences which are not coincidences. And the whole thing is, at that time, I was still on methadone, and I'd gotten really to a lower dose, but they let me take 8 bottles out of the state, and that's not done. Nobody has ever done this. Not that that's something, but if I didn't have that, I would have. The miracles of my grandkids, and one of which had a really rough time right after she was born, and I was able to be there for my daughter. Thought that she's doing private. But I don't know. I feel like kind of over the course of my life. Then I got liver cancer and survived that. I was supposed to be dead 2 years ago. The after effects are still there, but from radiation and all that. But I'm alive.
Yeah. And touching base on your miracles, from what you're describing, and we all see miracles different ways, but from what you're describing is things happening in a way that you thought it would happen one way and then it happened another, or being able to do things that you couldn't see your old self doing.
Right.
Like being there for your daughter and with your grandchild and just doing the things that you're like, if this had happened 3 years ago, there's no way, or 5 years, whatever, there's no way that I could have been
right
here.
The first night I was at the Helping Up mission, is when I met God. I mean, I already knew he was already in before, but I saw him working through people. We were all on this back deck or whatever, and everybody was smoking, but mainly people were holding each other up. And I'd look and I'd see a big guy crying tears, and another guy holding me, and all this stuff going on, but it's just like, wow.
Yeah. You saw love.
Yeah.
The presence of love.
And these are all broken, homeless people just like me. And again, from that night on, everything was going to be okay, no matter what got thrown at me. Yeah. And so that's where I'm at. And I've enjoyed doing what I do for a long time. I like helping other people like me. But now I don't think like that's enough.
I know that fire. I know that fire. So let's talk about your therapy process. And then I want to talk about the impact that you're making on people and how either you tell us a story of somebody that you have, things like that. So we'll go into that. But tell us about your therapy process, because you had mentioned something right before we started filming about people don't understand the therapy process. So let's talk about that. How do you do therapy? How was the process for you?
To me, it is everybody that comes in to a facility, either consciously or subconsciously, has a script that they're going to tell you. And what I like to do is throw them off the script.
Wow.
And then
okay, I do want to hear this.
Well, and somebody comes in and say, "Why are you here?" Excuse me. And they say, "Well, I've been doing drugs and alcohol." I said, "Nah." I said, "Tell you what, what's your first memory in life?" And this, nobody there. And then I say, "Okay, let me help." I say, "Let's say you're 5 years old. You wake up in your room, what do you see?" And now all of a sudden they're off the script.
Right.
And they don't know it. Now they're open to talking a little bit more. And because most people don't want to let you inside because you're like me. I think that there is a great fear that if you find out who you really are, it's going to be worse than the person you are. And you got to get past that.
Right.
And then I'm a narrative therapist. If you here you are right now, but that's like looking at the middle of a book. How'd you get here?
Right.
And so I have to know the whole thing, not just, and I used to do that with teenagers too. Why are you here? I was smoking pot after school. I said, what'd you have for breakfast?
Yeah. So you apply this process to your own practice.
Yeah.
So were you in therapy for a while? You mentioned 12 steps, so you did 12 steps.
Yeah, I was in therapy for 2 years.
For 2 years, okay. So was this before, after, during the 12 step?
It was both.
Okay.
Because I had always, I'll be honest with you, the fourth and fifth step kept me from finishing, because I'm not telling anybody my secrets. And so when in 2001, I got back with my sponsor, or friend and sponsor, who, by the way, didn't consider me sober till I got off the methadone. And I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal. If I overuse that or abuse it," because somebody was always controlling it. I didn't ever have it by my well, except for when I went to Texas. And I'll knock 6 months off my sobriety. But anyway, he went through the steps with me again, and because at that point I didn't care what anybody thought about me. It was I wanted to change, and then the therapy was a whole new thing for me.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
It lit me up, and honest to God, I don't even remember her name, and I feel bad about that. But for one thing, you know how, as a therapist, you can't really mention your religion unless you're in a Christian therapy. You can't tell what you believe unless they bring it up, right? And so she was a Christian woman. And I was on fire at this time. So she just started walking me back, kind of like she threw me off my script.
Oh.
And like I said, she let me whine about a girlfriend for a little while. 'Cause it's
Get that out of the way.
always a good.
It's always a girl. It's always a guy and a girl.
And then just started walking me back through my childhood and showing me the way it really was, not the way I have perceived it. Because then, back to that trauma, not only do you not like yourself, you blame yourself for everything.
Oh,
Dad would not hit Mom if I was a better kid. If I was a better big brother, my brothers wouldn't get hit. Yeah, all that stuff.
yeah.
And you just take on blame and shame and guilt forever.
Oh, I just felt that pain of a little child thinking that. Yeah.
And so in the chaos you wake up with every morning.
You were carrying that burden.
Yeah. Yeah. And because your mind and you're stuck in fight and flight. Literally, I was walking around for 42 years with undiagnosed PTSD.
Yeah.
I'm much better.
Yeah. So you worked through, you were in therapy, you worked through that narrative of not blaming yourself and releasing that burden that you were carrying.
Well, to see it from the outside perspective, like if I looked at another child, of course I wouldn't think that,
Right.
But looking at myself, I said, well, yeah, but this is me out here. This is my fault. And so I think that's what it does.
Yeah.
It gives you that outside perspective look at him. Yeah.
And when we're living in trauma, when we're living in situations, chaotic situations, things like that, we think that we're the only ones, that nobody will understand, that nobody in the world is, can relate to us, and we're alone. And so those narratives go through our minds when we're going through that trauma, and it's hard to reach out. And it's hard to see, so we reach out to coping mechanisms, and a lot of the times they're not the best choices, right? So to avoid this, just for those of you guys that are listening that you may have trauma in your life and you're still carrying that guilt, you're still carrying burdens like that, you're not alone. And it helps tremendously to have that outside person looking in.
Right.
It's like, that was not your fault. Whether it's, like I said, I work with populations with sexual abuse, and I know it's like sexual abuse was not your fault. And the emotions that come with any type of trauma, it's like, because you love the person, but you hate the person, but you love the person, but you hate, it's a love-hate relationship with the person that you witness the trauma with, and with yourself too, so it's that kind of push and pull of love and hate, but and hate a lot of the times it's easier to have those negative.
Yeah, and it does it makes you lash out at people you're not really mad at, stuff like that.
And self-harm.
Yeah.
In the form of addiction, in the form of any type of self-harm.
Yep. And we make it so easy. Yeah. Because I can tell you this, those Corona commercials where the guy is sitting on the beach with a beautiful woman,
Right.
never happened.
Yeah. We're still waiting for that Corona moment, Mike.
But and that's the whole thing. This doctor was going into saying that we allow people, you can drink yourself to death. Nobody's going to you're not going to be stigmatized or anything. You can smoke cigarettes and kill yourself with lung cancer, and you're not going to be.
You're normal.
But the minute you pick up a drug, they get what they deserve.
Right. Yes.
And the topic of alcohol and drugs annoys me, because they are all drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And
just wanted
until we put them all in one basket. But and then everybody says, well, it's a disease. Nope.
Mm-hmm.
Not according to the DSM-5.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Tell us about the work that you do now. Tell us that story, because I know that's a whole other side of.
Well, I'm not happy to say where I work, but.
Well, no, you work, but just tell us what kind of work, what kind of transformations do you see on people that you work with?
Some good, some bad, and it's I always compare counseling to golf.
Okay.
I'm not a very good golfer, right? but I'll hit 17 holes that are horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's going to be that one hole that I hit it sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what keeps me coming back to the course.
Mm-hmm.
I got a call from a client that just got released a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And and all he had was a question about, he was at Harris Center. He said, they're telling me I got to see another psychiatrist. I said, then do what they tell you. And that's okay. I don't have to. None. You're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Glad you're still sober.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that I don't have much time
Mm-hmm.
to counsel
Mm-hmm.
right now where I'm at,
Mm-hmm.
because we get wrapped up in so much paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad, and it's not just where I work.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. I dabbled with virtual therapy, but it's hard to get that up and running, to make a steady income or anything like that. But I'm open to it.
Right.
And some people prefer that because they don't have to get dressed up and go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Convenience.
So, but you want to hear what I'd like to do?
Of course.
What I would like to do is educate parents before they become parents, get the kids before they become niche,
Mm-hmm.
and just take trauma from birth to healing, because you can heal.
Yeah.
It's never really going to go away, but you can heal from it.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it in the right perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And trauma begets trauma. Yeah, especially in the drug world. Once you start that, you're putting yourself in traumatic events all the time. I've been shot at twice. I've been beat up on many times.
Mm-hmm.
But
just because of the environment where you are operating it. Yes.
And then people that get drugs, they get louder, 10 foot tall and bulletproof and all.
Yeah. And aggressive and verbally or physically. And
so basically I'd like to educate people on trauma, and it could fit any demographic. Churches, public schools, anywhere. To those who want to listen.
Yeah.
And because you got two parents that don't know that yelling and screaming could traumatize their child, they need to know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before they become parents.
Yes.
And a lot do. I see a lot of people play music and, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
and I think there's a lot of information out there about, things like you said, playing music to the kid or singing to the kid or reading books to the kid and stuff like that. But you mentioned something before that is so powerful that I always ask with my own clients, my own private practices, do your work first. Make sure you heal, because that can be passed on through lashing out, through reactions, through comments, through sarcasm, through, the silent treatment or, things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's learn to love yourself first.
Right.
And accept yourself, because otherwise there's no way.
It's really, and I didn't understand that. I learned to love when I got sober. And actually 2 women. In the end, and on end of things, they didn't feel the same way. But it didn't change the way I felt for them. It made me still want them to get what they're seeking, to be whatever is best for them. That's what I wish for them. That doesn't include me. It doesn't mean that I don't love them. I do.
Right.
I always say, if you say, well, I don't love you anymore, well, then you never did.
Yeah.
Because and with cases like mine, I didn't know how to.
How did you learn to love yourself, Mike?
Through therapy, through realizing that I'm not that bad a guy.
Yeah.
And being okay with that. I do the best I can because that's the best I can do.
Right.
And
Are you perfect?
no,
Yeah, that was a sarcastic question, but yeah, it's just because like if I'm not perfect, that I can't love myself. And no, it's loving yourself.
right. And I think that leads to a lot of things like anorexia and all that kind of stuff. I mean, no matter what addiction you're dealing with, food, gambling, sex, or it all goes back to that childhood that you had.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I do coach parenting for teenagers, but I focus a lot on we don't want to recognize that we have that trauma or childhood wounds because, if I speak about it, then I'm going to hurt my mom's feelings or I'm going to hurt my dad's feelings. And it's like, it's finding that forgiveness for yourself and for them and honoring your parents for doing their best and being the best parent. I know you were the best dad that you could be. Were you perfect? No. Were you, things like that. So it's like forgiving ourselves for that, but also having that space of being able to say, you know what? I know my mom was doing her best.
Right.
Did it give me trauma? Yes. And I tell my kids, at least I have two older teenagers, and I tell my own kids this all the time, say for your therapist, because I know I'm giving you trauma, even as a mental health professional and the best mom I can be, there's something that I'm doing that it's not going to fulfill to one of your needs because they're both very different. So it's not feeling guilty about, you know what, I'm not going to talk about my trauma because I'm going to make my mom feel bad.
Right.
And it's doing that process to you and through you.
And when you're so young, who you're going to talk to?
Right.
Dad always shake it off.
Yeah. Throw some dirt on it. And unfortunately, that's still the mentality of like, no, you're fine.
Oh yeah,
it's still very much there and not acknowledging. Man up. I know guys have that expectation of like man up or, be a man. What does that mean? You have emotions? What? Yeah.
Yeah, and I found out I'm very emotional. I used to think that was my weakness. Turns out to be on the street.
Mm-hmm.
But none of us are perfect, and I just want to do more to try to help. I can't, I'm not shooting for the stars, but I'm shooting for the moon. If I fall short of that, I'm still pretty high, right? And I don't like the way recovery is being done right now.
Okay.
Because it doesn't include trauma.
Mm-hmm.
All these trauma-informed care facilities, we're going to advertise that.
Mm-hmm.
Go hold somebody to the fire on it and see if they really stand up to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that means the maintenance guy is trauma-informed.
Right.
That means everybody is. Because on an intake, somebody can be re-traumatized if the tech doesn't react the right way to something or react, oh my God, or something like that. So it's a nice catchword, but nobody's standing.
Or what they say, there's a trauma informed, and they're like, oh yeah, but I have an addiction or I have substance abuse. It's no, that's something else, and there's not a merge of mental health.
And that's the whole thing. I think psychiatry, clinical, and medical are all islands instead of coming together
for the whole person.
And again, psychiatrists do a study,
yeah,
which I found surprising.
I know, yeah. Being in the mental health field, and I realized that it is.
Yeah, I worked with the intern. She said, "I'm studying it," and I go, "Okay, well, maybe things are changing, but well, that's your."
Yeah.
But it's just, and it could be done different. I think certainly not during detox, but once they're out of detox and they're doing, whether you're doing CBT or DBT or whatever, trauma has to be worked in there.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, to get their attention enough. I don't see the problem with having a trauma therapist in facility, and that's their only job. Because one of the issues now is there's not enough time, and that's true. But if you've got one that's stationed there, then you can create a client base. And I don't know. There's a lot of ways things could be done different, but I think we've been looking at it the wrong way.
You want to whole reprogramming.
It's a question of why. The why.
Why do you think?
Why is what got me sober. Why don't I like me?
Start asking that question.
And and that's recovering.
Why do I not like me?
Yeah.
Because you said something in the beginning that not everybody doesn't know. What did you say?
Not everybody that's traumatized becomes mad.
Addict, yes.
Some people are able to process that. And again, that's a genetic study that just began.
But every addict
had childhood trauma.
So what message, like what, I know that you say you want to do a lot. There's so much you want to do. We're running out of time. There's so many changes that need to happen from the core of our system and just in general. Just what is a message that you want to send to people if people are listening to this episode and you want to start with changing that one life that is listening to this? So there's 1,000 lives that are listening to this. What is that message that you want to send, Mike, based on your experience in your life?
It's not your fault. Robin Williams' movie, Good Will Hunting.
Oh, yeah.
That one scene is probably the best scene.
Powerful, yeah.
And it's not your fault. If you're traumatized as a child, you had nothing to do with it. You have no control over your life in your developmental years. But yet we own it. And we got to let it go.
And we're brought with that narrative.
Yeah. And then it gets, then it can be tagged on. You hear negative enough, you're eventually going to buy into it. Sometimes the words your parents tell you've heard, well, not probably all the time, the words are more painful than the physical abuse. You're brain dead.
Yeah. Something that I've heard from clients is, oh, that wasn't that bad. And it's a completely minimizing the traumatic event. Like even the parent telling you like, oh, it wasn't that bad. That's just your perspective. And it wasn't that bad as, the abuse wasn't bad or the trauma wasn't bad and things like that. And just kind of minimizing and robbing from that. But if you feel like it's something that it affected you, it did affect you.
Yeah, we can't compare pain, There's... the old joke is that I've sat next to murderers in AA, and I've sat next to people that I've spilled more alcohol than they ever drank. But their pain is as great as mine.
Yeah.
We can't judge pain, and we can't judge what you think is not so big a deal. If it's internally a big deal to the other person, that's going to be there. Yeah. So good point.
Yeah. So do you say you don't work with people directly right now? Is that something that you're looking forward to do? Or do you want to send a message to the people that work with?
I would like a platform I do both. I would like to get my virtual thing going. I've had clients over the years, but not enough to, it's just one thing, I'm not really expensive.
Yeah.
But because I know that can be hard too. But if I wanted to be able to go to schools, to churches, to anybody that will have me if they want to learn about how to deal with trauma, how to prevent trauma, and then how to get to the other side of it. And I think that's been on my heart pretty much since I recovered from liver cancer. So you're not doing what I want you to do now. So and that's why I appreciate this opportunity. Like a guy saying.
Yeah. So if you guys are listening out there and you have either a church group or schools or anything like that, that that will have to have the perspective of somebody that has gone through the dark, the light, the miracles, the trauma, the processing, the healing, and everything. Yeah. So, where can people find you? Do you have a?
I've got a website, and it is kind of hard to say, but
we'll add it to the comments of the episode. We'll make sure that we add it to the comments.
And my you can text me.
Okay.
At 832-360-5781.
Okay.
And just text, because if I don't know the number,
you're not going to answer.
Well, I was going to tell you, it's just we brought up church. Do we have a little time?
Yes, of course.
I was watching God's Not Dead, one of those movies, right? And there was one where they were, I think it's We the People, and they're doing homeschooling. And he was telling the story of Noah. And then they got interrupted. And I thought, how do you present the story of Noah without traumatizing a child?
Wow. Never thought of that.
Or Cain and Abel.
Right.
So we probably should rethink how we do children in Sunday school.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of hard to, let's say you got a little kid who's just gotten a puppy. Then he hears about all the other animals being wiped off the face of it.
Right. Yeah, that's a little, yeah.
Keep them in the New Testament.
So would you, like, for example, if a parent is listening to this episode, let's say me, right, and I have a 19-year-old that is dealing with addiction, is it okay for me to text you and say, hey, Mike, could you work with my daughter?
Yeah, if she's willing to be worked with.
Yes, of course, yeah.
But if not, I can work with the parent and help her understand what she's going through.
Yeah. Because I think there's a lot of youth that are going through, and because I'm part of like Facebook groups of like parenting teenagers and stuff like that, and parents posting their vaping, which is also an addiction, drugs, alcohol, and things like that. So if parents like we'll put Mike's phone number on the notes for the episode. But if you have a child that is going through that, you have experience working with teenagers and young adults. So if you need an extra resource, if you need the extra, we have to be humble enough to understand that we need help and have the courage to answer.
I think I sent you my Facebook stuff too. So if you would put that in my website and your phone number, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, we'll add all those things to the comments of the episode so that people can get in touch with you, because I think parents are so desperate to get help.
We started, I've also written like 6 books.
Oh, you just threw that in there at the end of the episode.
But, because they're self-edited, but they're mostly autobiographical. But one of them was called Yes, My Kid. We had started this program in Maryland for kind of like an Al-Anon, but more for parents and teenagers. And I wrote a workbook to go with it and then gave it to them. And as far as I know, that's still running up there. And, but parents need to understand why first of all, they're not going to understand.
Right.
But there are helpful ways they can deal with it. And and I'm happy to talk to anybody about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I don't think we have enough time to kind of tell. I would love to dig into so many things that you have said, but you have shared so much wisdom. You have such an incredible story, and you have a heart and a fire to help others. So I do appreciate that, and we, it was an honor for us to have you here. Thank you guys for listening to Mike's story, and it moved you and it resonated with you. Please do not hesitate to share with others. To get in contact with him if you need some guidance and some help. I'm pretty sure that Mike, if it's not him, he has some resources that can help you. Remember, this is not therapy. This is This is for entertainment purpose solely, to tell his story and to move forward with any help that you might need with mental health. We're going to add the resources to call 988 if you have suicidal ideations or anybody that has them, or there's a lot of help also with substance use and abuse. So thank you so much, you guys, for listening today. It was an honor to have you here with us, Mike. And look for the comments, share, subscribe, talk about it. Share with us your comments, your questions. And if you have put questions here on this episode and it's something that I